Hello, welcome to Power of 10, a show about design operating at many levels of Zoom, from thoughtful detail through to transformation in organizations, society, and the world. My name is Andy Pallane. I'm a design leadership coach, service designer, educator, and writer. My guest today is Joel Bailey, product and service director at Arwin.ai, a 4-year-old marketing technology startup that uses AI to help brands to manage and moderate their social media comments at scale. Joel brings 25 years of experience working in service design roles, leading change and building new stuff for a diverse range of organizations. He says if you slice him down the middle, he's 30% total service nerd, 30% AI and design fanatic, and 30% family man. Joel, welcome to Power of 10.
Good to be here.
So that 30%, that's like a sort of slice of Brighton rock, is it? There's different sort of
yeah. Do you know what?
That
is exactly the image. Although I think my family would have something to say about only getting 30%. But it depends. Maybe that's time based. Obviously not love based.
Okay, very well done. So look, tell us. I've talked a little bit in the intro about your background, but. I mean, I don't know how we know each other, but we've been in each other's orbits, certainly, if in the service design world. Tell me a bit about that journey to where you are now.
Yeah. I was trying to remember exactly how we connected. I think it's one of those ambient relationships that just it came out of the ether, right? As you say, in similar orbits. And I think it is around service design. So I was very lucky, I think, to stumble across service design very early on in my career. And I'm not a trained designer. I have an arts background. I didn't do any sort of qualifications or certificates in design. But I've always had a creative lean. And I think when I started working, and I was working in organizations where I was basically being asked to solve problems, which is what a lot of people get asked to do. If you're not doing admin, you're solving problems. And I was pretty frustrated with the tool set that was available, which was very kind of expert-led, best practice this, best practice that. And I think it was in one of those roles that someone said to me, what you're going towards is like service design, because I come from a digital background. And I remember I called myself an information architect at one point. I used to work across A2 size bits of paper, mapping out websites and things, right? And then I started looking at user-centered design. If anyone remembers the Rosenfeld book with the polar bear on the front, the information architecture book, legendary stuff.
Lou Rosenfeld's my publisher. Yeah.
All right, exactly. So now we're feeling old, right? Yeah. So these books were quite seminal to me, and it was very much making it up as I went along. And then I got to work I went to work as a contractor consulting in government in the UK. And I started doing what is now known as user-centered design. But back then we were just winging it. It was like the logic of the project I was doing, which was working on one of the big government super sites, as they were called. This one was businesslink.gov.uk, for anyone who cares. It's basically a website by the government to businesses. Yeah. And I learnt that the best way to create the outcomes you wanted was by asking users what they needed. And that the worst people to ask about what a small business owner needed was a civil servant at that point. Because they were like, well, they need to fill out form 20348. And it's like, well, do they really? They might have to by law, but that's certainly not what they want to do. Yeah. So that's when I first got into user-centered design. And then we fast forward, I guess, a few years, and somewhere along that road, someone said service design. And I remember going to the Wikipedia page, and it was like 2 lines, and it was like service design is applying user-centered design to a wider scope of organizational activities, all different channels, multiple touch points. I was like, okay, that's kind of what I'm doing. Because we had telephone lines we were dealing with email, we were dealing with web pages, PDFs, all that sort of stuff. So it's like, okay, so this is a good space to be in. And I guess the rest is sort of history, in that I got very invested in it. I really got excited about service design, and really excited about 2 things: the design approach, which I'm sure we'll talk about, which I still use, and service, and what service is, which as I said, I'm a bit of a nerd about service and what it is and how it works in my spare time. And now, if I come all the way to now, all these things kind of come together in this very unexpected way. So, I'm running a business, but they call it product, but it's a service business. It's got a big digital product in the middle that uses AI to detect and remove toxic commentary from social media, but it also uses the same technology to, have conversations with social media users on behalf of brands. So there is service happening there. We as an organization are providing a service to our clients, and we have to design it continually because our users have very high standards. Anyway, that's very sort of long answer to your question, but that's kind of how I found my way. And along the way, I've had quite formal service design jobs. I've worked, I worked at Live Work for a while. Everyone who knows service design knows Live Work. So I was very grateful to be able to work with Lavrans and Ben and the others over there. And I've led service design in large organizations and small. But now I'm not really doing service design as a job for the first time. I am applying it in a startup, which is so different.
Yeah. Well, let's come to why it's different actually in a second. I mean, it's interesting for me, you talked about the information architecture thing. I find sort of people go one way or the other and sort of encounter service design. One is they're working in sort of interaction design and UX, and they're like, there's sort of more than this. There's a larger ecosystem, or I want to be more involved. If only they had come to me earlier in that process and I could have inputted in the strategic part of it. And so they kind of do that zoom level out. I mean, this is why the show is named after that Eames Powers of 10 film, of the different levels of zoom. Or they go the other way, which is, I'm a sort of systems thinker, I'm a kind of ecosystem thing. And I think the IA thing is well, it's actually a good mix of the two, but there's definitely that kind of overview of how does all this kind of hang together and what is the kind of the view of this, and you've sort of gone that way. So I can kind of see where it meets in the middle.
Yeah, there was a third option, which was I'll just stay in the website UX space with my headphones on, looking at screens. Yeah. There were a few people that did that, and I did think about that at one point. But I'm just too curious, and I think ask too many questions. And then once you start asking about the call center, like what happens when people can't do this thing on the website, then you end up going to the call center and talking to the manager and asking them questions. It's just very organic. But that systems theory bit is fascinating to me. And I'm not a systems theorist. Yeah. I'm a systems thinker in the very basic sense. And I've read enough to be dangerous probably. But it's increasingly, you spend longer and longer in organizations of any size, you have to understand systems theory, and you have to understand that you can't change one thing without, some ramification elsewhere. So I'm very sympathetic to the systems world. It's complicated, hard to deliver.
It's complex, but, isn't it? It is complex, yes. Interrelated. And we just said the thing about, working there and they call it a product, but I call it a service. And, my endless rant that everyone's bored of by now is that everything's a service, and certainly anything that's digital is. I mean, I always say if you've ever turned on Slack and the the server's not working, or it's you just get a load of placeholder boxes. How you're using an avatar to a service, and anything else. Same goes for your banking and almost everything. And that is digital.
Yeah, and the way to frame it in my mind, I remember doing a presentation to a FS, financial services audience, and it was all about, are we trying to create better mortgages or better homeowners, right? What are we trying to do here? And in our organization, the service we're after really is we want to move our clients from one place to another, from a less good place to a better place. And the better place is they're just more engaged with their community, right? That's what our win is all about. Our mission is to make your social media more social. So that is all about more engagement. The product, one of our products, is a tool that auto-moderates all the horrible stuff, the spam, the racism, of which unfortunately there is still a bit too much of it on social media. So for me, it helps to think about service as an outcome, and it's about movement from A to B for anyone in life. And I take it very seriously, whether it's service leadership and how I'm trying to work with others to get them from A to B in their lives and careers, even with my family, right? It's like, what can I do to serve this person to move them forward? With our clients at Arwin, it is very important to not think that we're a rubbish removal business, because we could do, but that really limits your opportunity for that relationship with that client. When you say, we do rubbish removal over here, but actually our service is about getting you to better engagement, whether it's on your ads or on your organic. And so service for me is such a useful framework for that.
Yeah, I think not only does it sort of broaden your view of the ecosystem because it includes more than just the product, which also obviously every time you kind of broaden the lens, I mean, there's a danger to lose yourself, but there's also this idea of, there's a different way of, we could come at this from a different angle as well. And that's often where some of the innovation lies.
Yeah. Yeah. And, as service designers, we've all been invited to do innovation as much as just improvement, but you can't innovate, you're right, without a bigger ambition, and service gives you bigger ambition.
But conversely, you can't, service design had got, and I think it's probably for the reputation of some of the agencies that certainly, or the big consultancies that I might have worked for, of delivering sort of concepts and, and journey maps and blueprints. And then the clients run out of money. You go, here you go, good luck with that. And obviously, the real thing, the reason why our book is called From Insight to Implementation is because, how things are implemented makes such a massive difference. I mean, you just talked about businesses filling in a form or something. You hear this stuff. I mean, I don't know about you. Whenever I explain what I do to people, and that's a whole thing in itself, or what service design is, I then immediately get this barrage of, the other day I was trying to do X, Y, and Z, and this, and it's tiny things. It's always the gaps and the transitions where things go wrong, and
Totally.
screw people up. And you mentioned that sort of flow chart of, person does this and then they go to that, and the arrow, innocent arrow or sort of hairline between those two boxes on the flow chart contains a whole lot of horrors when it goes wrong, right?
Yeah, and I think you and I, we both had a very similar visual metaphor for this, which is like, I think yours was crossing the chasm or something like that.
The crevasse.
The crevasse. Now I did a blog post a few years ago about crossing the chasm, I think I called it, which is that line between two boxes on a process map actually goes across cultural boundaries or organizational boundaries or team boundaries or geographical boundaries. And in that, all sorts of things get lost, lots of tacit knowledge. And that's what service designers do, is they're trying to stand in the user's point of view and say, how am I being carried from A to B? It looks so simple here from a business analysis point of view, but the reality is I'm suddenly being handed to someone or another part of the organization who doesn't care about me as much as that first bit. Like sales, they really cared about me. Onboarding, they don't care about me so much because I'm now just I'm a product to be processed through onboarding. Anyone who's bought a new utility, you're done. We've won you. Right, So and we'll come on and talk about startup and how it's different. But ideas implementation is obviously massively shrunk down in my world. We can have an idea and implement it in hours, which for much of my career was just not possible because the raw material of my work was other people. So I'd have to work with other people to develop conceptual ideas, and then they'd have to work with other people on committees to make change happen within the organization to make that concept a reality. We obviously don't have that. We are 15 people, and we work very quickly to take an idea into reality, however quick as we want to, or not,
I, like you probably, have had large enterprises say, treat us like a startup. We want to be like a startup. And it's like, well, so what does that mean? And a startup, actually, one of the things is, it's not like, we're really innovative, and so that's that's kind of what they're hoping. But one of the things of that is a startup has often key people are wearing many hats, right? Or at least a couple. You have such a small group of people that the communication lines are very, very short. Literally, I'm the person next to me, or I whatever, even if they're remote now, there's only a handful of people, and those people are empowered to make decisions, right? Because it's probably their thing anyway. And so when you say enterprise client that you want to be treated like a startup, are you happy to get rid of most of your decision-making and governance process that gets, well, not governance, but kind of, gatekeeping process that gets in the way of that? Can we just have direct line to someone who can make a decision? And, can we try stuff out and be risky? And they're like, yeah. So we'd like to be a startup, but, not those things. and so then they always fail. So I'd really like to kind of come back in a minute. I'd really like to talk about the design and AI thing, but just go back and tell us a little bit more about what Arwin does. Because I think it's really interesting. And I want to ask a few questions around that too.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of people just kind of sigh a little bit when they hear the words AI at the moment. And we are in that hype cycle dip, right? And I get that. And first thing I'd like to say is that Arwin we have been AI from the start 4 years ago. So we're pre-ChatGPT. So it makes us really old. It makes us wise like Gandalf, right?
Yeah.
So we're pre-ChatGPT. We've been doing this for quite a long time in AI terms. Not obviously, I mean, AI is 30, 40 years old, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, the what we do as Arwen is, it's probably easier to start from the origin story, from where it began. So the Euros, which are being played now, if we go back 4 years ago, we remember the racism that was thrown at the players who missed the penalties. It was kind of at that point that Matt and David, CEO, CTO, got together and said, we've got to solve this thing. We can solve this thing. Let's solve this thing. I came on board a bit later. And what we built is a platform that pulls in data models and algorithms from all sorts of different providers. And then we plug this thing called Arwen into your social media profiles in an authorized way. We're authorized by the different networks. And then Arwen scans every single comment that you get on social media. And if it finds something that breaks your rules, and we set those with each client. So everybody wants to get rid of spam, so porn bots and crypto bots and all the fraudulent stuff, which is just growing.
So 90% of the internet.
90% is there, and certain networks obviously have it worse than others. Yeah. And obviously, if you're a brand and you're trying to connect with your audience, either on paid or organic, that stuff really gets in the way. It's a pollutant, pure and simple. So we remove that, and we do it by studying both the content, and we have probably the world's largest database of spam items in the world, and we do fuzzy matching, so we don't do like exact keyword. We don't use keywords at all. Actually, we do fuzzy matching. Basically, Arwen's saying, how close is this to every other spam item I've ever seen? Yeah. It looks at the comment and it looks at the profile. So it can look at the profile's avatar. It can look at the different characteristics of the profile to determine and score how likely that is to be a spammer's profile. And then it looks at the content itself and makes a decision. It does all of that in under a second, and then it hides it if it goes over a certain threshold. Okay, right. So that's the simplest way of describing it. Now we do that for spam, and that's like our biggest seller because everybody wants to get rid of it. But then we also do it for unwanted content. So that is what we call in the UK lawful but awful. Okay, so the networks are pretty good at getting rid of illegal content, and that stuff is really the unpleasant
because they have to.
Because they have to in different regions in different ways, and that's a colossal job, and they do a very good job of it because we don't see things like child abuse on social media, right? So that they are doing a very good job. The awful but lawful bit, because it's a bit loose and fast in legal frameworks. Globally, even our online safety bill in the UK is a little bit fuzzy about how to deal with that. That's where we step in. So a brand basically says, okay, so we've got a number of Formula One teams who have very premium sponsors, very large audiences, increasingly a female audience that they want to engage with because they've watched maybe Drive to Survive, the Netflix program. They've really engaged in this sport in a new way. And we've worked out through our analysis that these female fans are they're about 25% of Formula One fans, but they contribute about 80% of the vibes to the community. They're really positive. So, and yet they get all the toxicity. So then we start helping them to hide misogyny, sexism, sexual aggression, all of which occurs in sporting environments, unfortunately. Gaming environments we work in a bit as well. Yeah. So it's all about, and I go back to my earlier point about we are trying to improve engagement. The first step to improving engagement is to put some rules in place we use the analogy of a bar, right? You walk into a bar and there are people smashing bottles in the corner, shouting abuse, racist abuse, or, trying it on in really offensive ways with women. Whatever it is, we come in. I often think of that film, Roadhouse, come in like Patrick Swayze, okay, the old Roadhouse. We come in like Patrick Swayze and we just tidy things up. Some people do get blocked from the community. We we automatically identify those people. But everyone else just finds that you can't say these things anymore. We help our clients write a clear policy, put it on the door. And then within 3 months, they have got at least on average 21, 22% increase in engagement. And the number of toxic comments has gone down by around 70%.
Just because it's just not a horrible place to hang out anymore.
It's not a horrible place, and no one wants to be, there's a real sheep mentality.
It's the whole Nazi bar thing, right? Isn't it?
Yeah. Exactly. So you denormalize it. We talk about denormalizing toxicity, which is why we invest in speed. Let me give you an example we've done quite a lot of behavioral analysis on this.
Yeah.
So the behaviors of a hater, a troll, and the behaviors of the sheep that follow them are quite obvious when you look at the data patterns. So let's say client posts a beautiful picture of a football ball being kicked into a goal by a female football player. Someone comes in and comments and says, "Get back in the kitchen." We've seen all these, so I'm not describing anything. These aren't my words, let's be clear. So that someone posts that as a comment. As soon as that is seen by other people, it creates permission for other people to do it. So they come in and start saying, you shouldn't be
Women
doing
have
this
no place in
football
football
thing.
or what, okay.
All of that. Yeah. Because we get rid of that first comment and we hide it in seconds, often under a second, then it doesn't create that wave of permission. And we shorten the life of a potential toxic event considerably as a result.
Right. I've got a question for you, which I would imagine like everyone else is thinking.
Yeah.
Obviously, you do this for brands, right? Because whatever Mercedes, AMG, Formula One team don't want to have that stuff next to their brand. And in fact, that's one of the most sort of best ways to kind of pressure brands to shift the way they think about certain issues is to highlight that. Why don't the social media platforms do this themselves? Why is X and everyone else? Why, or Substack for that matter, talking to the Nazi bar thing, why aren't they doing it? Why? I mean, is it just they haven't hired you yet, or is it problematic at the scale
there's a couple
they're
of
at?
reasons.
Yeah.
Well, partly it's scale.
Yeah.
So it's important to think about pre-publication moderation and post-publication moderation.
Okay.
Again, I would say they do an excellent job of pre-publication moderation on illegal content. Very good at finding illegal content and stopping it from getting out. That in itself is a colossal data management job, huge amounts of data processing going on. The awful but lawful stuff that I'm talking about, there's a few reasons why it gets really hard for them to do. First of all, they aren't legally obliged to do it. Okay, Section 230 of the Communications and Decency Act, which some people will be familiar with in the US, where they're all based, basically says they're not an editor. They don't have to edit. They're not responsible for what their users put online. And there are all sorts of challenges going on both ends of the spectrum to that. Some states in the US are saying you can never moderate anything pre-publication. It's against the First Amendment or the right to free speech. Others are saying you have to protect children. So this is playing out and has been since we started the business. So that legally, if they start pre-publication moderation of the comments that I'm describing, then they are basically saying, well, we are an editor. And then they're leaving themselves open, I think, to a challenge of like, well, if you're going to do it for that thing, you've got to do it for all these other things that I care about. And then we get into the really hard bit, which is one person's really toxic comment is not another person's really toxic comment, unfortunately. Now, some are. I mean, I think I'm not going to do them on your lovely show because it wouldn't be right. But there are some comments that I see that no one in the world would go, oh, that's great. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. But unfortunately, you get into grey areas, which is why we don't set any standards on our clients. We work with them to work out what is your graphic equalizer to profanity, to insult. And it's different for every client because they're different brands and they have different communities and they're engaged. So sport is going to be very different from children's entertainment, obviously, different demographic. And you can't expect one network to do all of that on behalf of everybody globally. It's nigh on impossible. And I posted about this the other day, actually. So I think there are a number of factors that prevent them from doing it. I also think that if you do go into the pre-publication moderation world, you really take on a responsibility. Clearly, as a network, you're making your money out of attention, the eyeballs that see the ad. Yeah. If you're having to put a human set of eyeballs on every bit of content, every comment before, the business model just won't stack up. You'll be spending so much to check everything that you won't be making enough out of the ad eyeballs. So human eyeballs one side, human eyeballs on the other side, they both end up costing the same. So I am very sympathetic to the networks because I think the other thing I'm going to go one step further and say we do expect social media to be a utopia when the rest of the world isn't. Okay. Now I know we can look at the algorithms around ranking, although Meta have done some great changes that our clients benefit from that positive interactions get ranked higher than negative interactions. So they are working it. But I think we've all seen that drama is what the ranking algorithms go for. And drama is often where toxicity lives. So people are pushed into places where there is toxicity. But we can't, a lot of our clients, if you go to if you go to a store or an event, or you hang out with the CEO, they've probably all got security at the front door. They've got security in a driver that drives them around if they fly or do something. So they have extra levels of insurance and care and protection on themselves and their buildings. And really that's no different on social media. So I think we've just got to be careful about the networks. They've got to make the human race just much nicer to each other. It's really hard.
Yeah, I think it probably says the thing you were talking about, eyeballs, says something more, I think, around, I would suggest broken, but certainly, or toxic or difficult business models, right? That's the problem, as, the cardinal sin of the internet is that it lacked micropayments and that created advertising or ad tech, right? So then everything kind of follows on from there. I'd like to move on a little bit. You talked before about something I want to circle back to. You said, obviously, when I was doing other stuff, it involved a kind of group of people, and the pathway from idea to trying something out was much longer, weeks, months. And in some cases, lots of expense too, and infrastructure. And now you are saying, that's much, much shorter now. We can come up with an idea and try it out very, very quickly. How much is kind of that because of the AI aspect of it, or how much is it, what role is technology playing in it there, and how much is it to do with your culture as a startup?
Well, I mean, definitely the culture of a startup helps.
Yeah.
It's all experiment, right? The whole business is an experiment alive in the world. But if I look at any department, I say department, we don't really talk about departments, but like we've got engineering and product, we've got marketing, sales. It's all ongoing experiments. And the first thing you learn when you're working in a startup is that most of the books are wrong, or they were right for a certain context, but they're wrong for your context. And so you quickly realize that the most important thing you need is an experimental framework. So I'm working with Tushar, who works in our marketing team, on a range of marketing experiments, which is where I guess the AI also comes in. Not our own AIs, but other AIs out in the world that we're working with. So we're working with a couple of different AI products that allow us to not just to take our kind of experimental DNA of a startup, bring AI into that, and it then accelerates the experiment itself. So things like research, secondary research, primary research, less so, although people keep trying to tell me that avatars are going to do primary research. I don't think trust is there yet for qualitative research, but hey. But quantitative research, it's amazing, right? I can get an AI to go and find out lots of facts for me very quickly and compile them. You've obviously got to look out for hallucination, but the thing you've got to remember in a startup and in any business is all you need is a hunch. It's a Rory Sutherland thing here. He says, we're not doing quantitative research for like Elsevier or some university or something. We don't have to be 100% right. We just have to be right enough, or righter than the next person. And one of the things that I was blessed with as a service designer in previous roles was lots of good data, like qualitative data and quantitative data. I could go out and speak to customers. I could go out and do research projects that last weeks. We probably can't do that so much anymore. I think things have changed in budget wise, but that was a real luxury. In a startup, you're very data poor and very time poor. So the experimental framework plus AI allows you to overcome the time piece, but also bring in the data. And you just accept the fact that you might get errors in the data. Because you've just got to be faster at getting to the hunch and then sitting down and going, it's good enough. We're going to push the green button and we're going to commit to this as an approach.
Now you're not generating content, which is where, that can, I think, be quite...
We have a second product. We'll talk about that separately.
Well, putting content out in the world, that's where it's really problematic, particularly with AI, as you know. You've seen this kind of weird thing going on where, companies would fire an employee, a customer service employee, if they kind of said that kind of thing, in a chat thing, but obviously they just kind of plug a chatbot in and let it go, hey, crazy, and some with some crazy results too, and not great results for them. But with the moderation thing, you can also there's this very well known thing that part of the problem that happens with moderation is if, for example, a person of color is talking about an experience of racism that they've had, it gets flagged up because they're using the words that the racists are using, and it gets flagged up as content, and so those marginalized voices get further marginalized. How do you deal with that aspect? Because there is it is still it's very, very complex, obviously, the whole AI thing. There's a lot of it. There's just a black box. We don't really know what's going on. Even the people who've kind of put it together, once it's got up and running. But how do you balance that?
You're absolutely right. This is one of the risks of AI: is who's built it, how they built it, on what data has it been trained, etc. Yeah. I mean, we just to distinguish between LLMs, which we'll come on to, and how they work and how they've been trained, versus the various models that we've been using pre-ChatGPT and continue to use really effectively. They have all been built and trained by experts in this field, right? So they are detection algorithms, and they are benchmarked for bias and error rates. So around, white supremacism, bigotry, racism, all these things, okay? And I could go into quite a lot of detail about why we're confident in how they make decisions. So clearly that's something to keep an eye on. I think when you get into the LLMs bit where it feels like a bit more of a black box, I can tell you how the other ones work, and I can tell you how they were trained and how they were built.
So there's some rigor behind that.
There's provenance and rigor. LLM it feels like, they've just created something and it's just gone out to the world and hoovered everything up, and it's coming out with something quite useful, but is it entirely true and right? So we do use large language models, and we do generative AI. So I've talked about the Moderate product. We have an Engage product. Yeah. So like I said earlier, our service mission is to make our clients more social, make their social media more social. Yeah. So once you've got rid of all the bad stuff, and that bar is now great, and everyone's hanging out, having a great time, now you want to talk more to your community. It's safe, it's lovely, it's got all the people in there that you want in there. The most surprising thing to me about social media, so $270 billion got spent on social media last year, sort of globally. Someone came up with that number. It's really big. And it roughly sounds like about right when I hear about some of the social media advertising budgets. Now, you put that content out there, that content on social media will be responded to. You will get comments. Clearly, I've talked about the negative ones, the toxic ones. Negative's different. Toxicity, we get rid of it. But you're going to get negative comments, you're going to get questions, you're going to get feedback, people going, yay, I love this. The amount of brands that do nothing with those comments just astounds me. You spend all this money, advertising essentially is trying to get someone's attention. You've got their attention, they're asking you something, they don't do anything. It's like they're the orphan child. Yeah, everyone's all about create more blog posts. So we use large language models to help down at comment level. So if someone's looked at your ad and says, great, where can I buy this watch? Like you can't scale a team, well, you can, it'll cost you a lot of money to answer every comment on every social media channel in real time. You got to do it within an hour and to get into that buyer moment. Arwen can do that. Now, to go to your point about the fears that we all have about hallucinations and stuff like that. So the latest technology that we're using, which is called retrieval augmented generation, lovely phrase, RAG. Retrieval augmented generation basically says you're a large language model, you've learned off all this stuff, some of it good, some of it bad, but I have a load of content here that I know is good. Yeah, it's the company policy, it's the brand voice, it's the rules and regulations, it's the opening times of all the stores. They're facts. Like and I want you to refer to those things when you're making a consideration, generating a response. So what Arwen does is it goes to the large language model and says, the large language model goes, this person's asking a question about a watch. And then the RAG element looks at the rules and says, they're looking at this watch, it's this advert, this watch, yes, you can buy it here, here's the URL, and it connects them through, okay? Yeah. So what we're trying to do with RAG, and it's a Meta-originated technology, because they're obviously fighting this kind of, all this crap firing across the internet from AI, is like we've got to put rules around it, you've got to put control around it. And for us, it's so important because if Engage is going to be having conversations with people online and delivering service, let's be honest, that's what it's going to be doing, then it has to be accurate, or the lawyers will never sign it off. Because we've all heard about, I don't know what brand it was, a car brand in the US selling a car for $1, because the chatbot, they managed to get it to do that. No legal team is now going to sign off a chatbot AI. We're not even rolling it out as fully automated. We're like, it's semi-autonomous. It's a co-pilot. Yeah. So our AI reads the question, reads the comment, whatever, and then generates 3 alternatives, and then the manager can go in and just choose which one they want to use. Okay, but it's the key thing is this RAG technology. It allows you to put guardrails in so that the AI doesn't just freak out and promise people like a new car.
So talking of Copilots, I'm not going to talk about Microsoft Copilot. As we are speaking, and this will probably come out in a couple of months, so as we're speaking, Figma have just shown all their new stuff. There's a lot of AI tools in there for design. And, I had a dream, a frequent sort of daydream as a kid that, I had a robot me, duplicate me that went into school and did lessons and all the boring stuff whilst I stayed at home reading comics and, eating sweets. And the question is, it's a part of me when it looks at some of that stuff that it can kind of very quickly generate. And there's some stuff I saw the clip where you've got a whole, instead of having sort of lorem ipsum text, it just sort of generates a load of actual sort of placeholder text and all that stuff. And obviously it's going to do a lot and sort of make prototypes really quickly, go from sort of idea to prototype. And part of me is like, that's amazing. That takes a lot of drudgery away. And then the other part of me is, but design isn't just design, right? As in the end artifact. Designing is a process of thinking whilst you're designing. And actually that process of prototyping, of, even sketching on paper, actually, there's talking to Eva Lotta Lamb in some comments of a thing she did the other day, which is teaching people to sketch wireframes again in paper. Right? There's a lot of thinking that goes on in the designing, and I really kind of worry about that. I worry less about the AI taking people's jobs, although there's clearly there will be a lot of sort of low end product managers who will go, "Oh, this is great. I don't need designers anymore. I can just kind of write in a prompt and it'll send some stuff to engineering," which is how they treat design anyway. Rather than I want to have this kind of trio and have this kind of good conversation and understand. So the good ones do that, right? So I can see the advantages of that, but I do sort of worry about that side of it. What's your view on it, talking about that sort of going from idea to prototype very quickly?
Well, we've both worked in consulting design, businesses and agencies. And I think we've all seen over the years that what is pushed out as original work is often just a repeat of like, oh, you want a website? Well, we did that with one. We'll kind of use a version of that. So I think for me, it comes down to like, what is the job of inventing a wheel, of actual invention, is going to have to remain a part of the designer's core skill set, right? The job of I think there's lots of reinvention of wheels going on out there and being sold as, you want a website, it's £100,000. It's like, but we've done 14 of them, we're just going to repackage this one and give. There's a lot of that going on. And I think, to be honest, when we look at it, it's the same people sitting down. A website is now, I'm using that as an example, but you could take anything. It's a very well thought out, very well understood artifact, object. Yeah. And clearly you want to make it right for that brand. But for me, we're talking a sort of co-pilot logic here, which is get me to a good, decent first draft. So it's all structured and labeled right. And there's no like stupid mistakes where the sitemap just doesn't connect and has broken ends to it. And then let me go in and add in how this is going to work for this brand and this particular use case. Yeah. I just think that design it's been doing a lot of recreating of things and treating that as creativity when not necessarily the case, when some of these things are already well invented, well understood, and it hasn't really done us any favors. Equally, though, the best briefs are the ones where, all right, we're struggling in this market. Everybody's things look like this. Yeah. We need something that's different, right? And again, it comes back to your point about just the client. I used to say, they say, we want innovation. I'd say, okay, do you actually mean you want to invent something new or improve the thing you've got? Yeah. Because if it's improving the thing you've got, I do think AI has a role to play there. As I said, about testing things, researching things, understanding things, coming up with options, potentially then designing that and the evolution of that thing. But if you want something brand new, like very inventive, I totally agree. Like, I wouldn't say never, because I just don't know how this is going to change. And I'm with the lady who said, and it was a lady, I think, who said, I want AI to be doing the dishes and washing up so I can do the art, not the AI doing the art, so I have to do the washing up, right? I'm very much in that zone, but I do think we can't help but some of the drudge work, not the drudge work, because some people love doing,
the detail work,
wires
right?
and boxes, and AI, an IA, and information architectures. But let's be honest, when I did information architectures, I always forgot about little bits, and I have to go back and do them later. The joy of an artificial intelligence is it generally is complete, right? It doesn't finish the job till it's finished. So you'd expect me to be a bit pro it, and I am quite pro it. I think that designers have peddled a lot of design that isn't really creative work. It is just taking something else and putting a slightly different skin on it. On patterns that are very well understood, which is, maybe a spicy take, but that's the one I'm giving you.
So my response to that would be, though, I think that is a systems effect of the environments they're working in that the agile digital product kind of thing has been it's been great for so many things, right? It's really improved the ability of teams to get past all that sort of waterfall stuff and big brands, big enterprise brands that actually, most of my banks, having had really, really awful kind of apps and stuff now, have kind of reasonably decent ones and things like that. And that's definitely because of that. On the flip side is I tweeted, I didn't tweet because I don't tweet anymore, but I tooted the other day and I put it on LinkedIn, which is a sort of AI is kind of the wind tunnel of creativity, right? But, there's some very famous silhouettes of cars out there of, small car sedans, SUVs. And in the silhouette, they all look the same. And that's because they've all been designed in a wind tunnel. And at some point, everyone optimizes for pretty much the same stuff and everything starts to look the same. In my experience, whenever I've been using ChatGPT or whatever it is, it gravitates towards that sort of mediocre middle. And ChatGPT, therefore, sounds always like a kind of a management consultant because it's like sort of very average stuff spoken with amazing confidence. And what I'm saying about design is I think in an environment where that was a sort of lean and agile thing, where speed and velocity without much thought is always held up as the most important thing because it comes from that startup world. But, in other areas, it doesn't make so much sense. When everyone is working very, very fast or under pressure to work very, very fast, they'll lean into what the tools do well, right? And sort of they'll use that particular, what used to be, rave posters all look the same because they all had the same Photoshop filter, or, in the rise of Flash and all the vector stuff, it was all vector stuff because that's what the tools did well. They all leave their signature. And now, with Figma, you can almost tell, this has just been a kind of design pattern that's been pulled down. And in some cases, obviously, the design system, which the designers are just kind of pulling on. So there's not really that, as you're saying, there's not really that much original work being done. I kind of feel like that's not because designers can't be bothered. It's because they're under pressure to operate really quickly. And I worry that the sort of AI, kind of say the AI Figma stuff, just kind of perpetuates that and just makes it even worse. Right?
Yeah, I think it will. I think there's two pressures here. One is like a sort of general capitalist neoliberal pressure of make it as lean as possible and scrub everything out. But there's also a pressure the other way, which is people like familiarity, right? And do I want the copy explaining something to me about what I should do as a small business to be written by a copywriter, or it's just instructional in that sense. It could be written, as long as it's written in plain English for the average age of 10, which is the average reading age for most of the UK. And most copywriters don't do that. And I always was surprised when working on copy stuff that people still write copy for people who are like, reading age of like 15, 16, like The Economist, and people don't, right? So you can tell an AI that I want you to write this for the reading age of the average UK reader or whatever country you're in. And it will do that. And it will do that repeatedly. And sometimes you don't want creativity in there. You just want, and I'm talking about service stuff here. Marketing is different. Marketing, you're trying to capture attention. You've got to have something creative in there. I think creatives are reasonably safe in some of that stuff. I saw the Toys R Us little video that someone's put out that saw a creative. I think there's a way to go with capturing attention and delighting the soul of another human via AI. I think there's a way to go. But a lot of the stuff we're talking about is just a lot of the work that I used to do as a service designer is like, well, we just got to get into the terms and conditions, and we've got to get into the instructions on this page. And do we have to have those there? And if we are, can we make them really much simpler, please? And I'd have to work with copywriters to do all that. And I'm not having a go at copywriters here, but I think everybody wants to bring creativity to a project that often doesn't need it. But we need creativity in the right place, right? I'm not denying that, because your point about everything, all those Ray flyers were the same until they weren't, because somebody said, hold on, I'm going to do something different. And I don't think it'll be any different here. AI already is making everything very generic. And so then something else will have to change. And it'll always be a creative decision to make that change.
There is a lot of very generic. I mean, a lot of I don't know, I had like 3 or 4 websites open for different stuff the other day. And I looked at them and I was like, wow, they're all using the same typeface. They all use the same hierarchy, you know, as it was all.
And
it wasn't bad. That's the thing, right? It wasn't bad. I wrote this essay a little in my newsletter, the last newsletter. It was called On Mediocrity. And, you know, it was like, well, it's just sort of H&M T-shirts, you know, everything is like H&M. And it's kind of fine, but it's not very exciting either.
No, and I think that's it, right? And a lot of organizations settle for it's fine, and a lot of managers and workers will settle for it's fine because it makes their life easier. If you can do 8 hours work in 1 hour, I mean, you know, people do gravitate towards that sort of, you know, decision making. I think that's why AI is so disruptive inside organizations, because you want the quality there. And who determines what quality looks like when everybody has access to something like this? I think AI within the organization and having proper guardrails on that, so that people are creating good quality right for this brand, right for this organization, whether it's internal comms or external customer comms, whether it's in the service that's outward facing or inward facing. Like there's so many. You know, it takes me back to almost like the early days of the .com, right? It's like, whoa, this is all new. Where do we start? What's important? And the perennials are still the same. Like if you're trying to capture my attention, you've got to be interesting, and I've got to love something about this. But if you're just trying to tell me to do something, just give me the facts really. But in fact, get out of the way. And the promise of AI obviously is to get totally beyond the interface, right? Is that I'm just like, hey, AI thingamajig, I need a holiday next year. You kind of know what my family likes. Come back to some options, you know, like we talk about body doubles. I'd like to send a version of myself off into the world as a gopher, and it will come back and say, well, I found 3 holidays and they're in this sort of price range. And like that's kind of how that's very attractive. We're obviously the question we might come on to is that what does that mean for a designer? Because in a way, I'd like to be a designer who could go off and do secondary research for the day as a body double, come back, tell me what you've learned. But I still want to be the person who synthesizes it and goes, oh.
Well, that's the thing. I think there's a thing I read the other day, which is, you know, what AI doesn't have is sort of common sense, discernment, and taste. And you know, I think one of the things that does, and it's interesting actually because I looked up the etymology of intelligence today actually because I was to make a snarky comment on LinkedIn. But it was, and it's that, right? It's pretty much that, and so, you know, artificial intelligence is such a sort of misnomer. I think one of the things that what you just described does then highlight is it differentiates really good ideas from the kind of craft dazzle, right? And I think that then that sort of evens that out. We are actually coming up for time. So there is one final question, the one small thing question, which is what one small thing is either overlooked or could be redesigned that would have an outsized effect on the world?
Okay, you talk about a thing. I'm going to go right back to the beginning of the conversation because it's a bit of an attitude, really. I think it's an attitude to serve that I've designed into all sorts of organizations, or tried to, and I'm certainly trying to do it in ours, which is service, and service to others, whether it's people that you work with or whether it's a customer that's giving you some money for some exchange of value. But for me, it's a real anchoring concept. I've been a service designer. I know service designers, but I don't think most people really think about service as a concept and what they're trying to do. But for me, it lifts my entire life. Which is why it connects with religion. And I'm not religious, but like I can see why that connects. So for me, if you're doing any sort of design, you're thinking about a service. Like, don't just think about the service as the noun, right? Think about the verb, the doing of it. And what are you trying to move forward here? it's not necessarily you're trying to create a widget or a product or anything like that. It's like, what is the outcome you want to achieve? Now, that's a bit abstract. It's not a thing, but it is very meaningful to me that I am trying to serve the world in a better way. And therefore, that anchors me down to, well, what does this person need to move forward? I don't know. I need to find out. But it's helped me through my design career. And it just so happens to be helpful because the majority of businesses in Western countries where I tend to work are service industry organizations. And I'll be honest, they don't really understand what that means, right? They have forgotten because of their scale that they're service organizations, and helping them to remind, and everyone knows, like I used to start my workshops, and you probably do something similar, by saying, right, I just want to go around the room. Just tell me the best service experience you've had last
service
week.
envy.
Or tell me the worst. Yeah, tell me the worst. And everyone knows it. Everyone's like, oh my God. And they'll never forget the worst one. They'll never forget the best one. But then they go back into their service organizations, they forget it. So like, I think just rekindling that little flame, and I have it on every aspect of my life. I try to. There'll be people listening to this going, John, he doesn't do that for me at all. But I am trying. And I just think it really helps to create an integrity to the design process, to whatever you're trying to do. So that's the one small thing I'd ask everybody to take into account. I think it can change the world, right? I think service is I actually heard Keir Starmer talking about it in his speech, like a return to service. King Charles did it in his speech, all about service. No one's really getting it, so I think it's a communications issue. I got it, so I'm the one person going, yeah, I get it, because I think it's really profound. So
that's a very fine answer.
I'll leave you with.
Thank you very much. Where can people find you online? Arwin is arwin.ai.
Arwin.ai is where you'll find our service and what we do. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm probably mostly there these days because we're a B2B software as a service business. That's where we live. I used to have blogs and things. I am on X. I am on Instagram. I am on all these places because it's my business to know how they work. But LinkedIn, otherwise Arwin.ai or Joel at Arwin.ai.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for being my guest on Power of 10.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
You've been watching and listening to Power of 10. You can find more about the show at Polaine.com, where you can also check out my leadership coaching practices, online courses, sign up for my very irregular newsletter, Doctor's Note. If you have any thoughts, put them in the comments or get in touch. You can find me as at apolaine at pkm.social. I'm on LinkedIn, my website. You'll find it everywhere. You Google, all the links are in the show notes. Thanks for listening and watching, and I'll see you next time.